that there are 370 million indigenous people around the world and spread across more than 90 countries. They belong to more than 5,000 different indigenous people and speak more than 4,000 languages. Indigenous people represent about 5% of the world population. The vast majority of them, 70%, live in Asia.
There are open ways to support the rights of indigenous people. Number 1, focus on the priorities. Indigenous people must choose their own way of life, get control over their own education, healthcare, and so on, unless their lives are secure. Thus, the overwhelming priority. Number 2, include indigenous people in discussion of land use. Without land, indigenous peoples have no livelihoods, by eliminating the ways of survival. In this context, states need to respect the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. Indigenous people need to be consulted about the use of their lands and included their development processes.
The number of indigenous people in the Philippines is unknown, but it is estimated that between 10% and 20% of the country's population, indigenous people's rights are laid out in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People adopted in 2007. Indigenous peoples are among the most marginalized and vulnerable groups in country across our regions.
There are many indigenous people share legacies of removal from traditional lands, destruction of their cultures, discrimination, and widespread violations of their human rights. Indigenous people are often marginalized and face discrimination in countries' legal system, leaving them even more vulnerable to violence and abuse. Discrimination is the reason why indigenous peoples makes up 15% of the world's extreme poor. Globally, they also suffer higher rates of landlessness, malnutrition, and internal displacement than any other groups.
So here are the laws that protects the indigenous people. So Republic Law 8371, known as the Indigenous People Rights Act, or IPRA, was enacted in 1997. It has been praised for its support for the culture integrity of indigenous peoples, right to their lands, and the right to self-directed development of these lands.
Here are also laws, which is IPRA or Certificate of Ancestral Domain Titles. CAD-TS are issued to formally recognize the right of possession and ownership of indigenous cultural communities, indigenous people, ICCs, or IPs over their ancestral domains as identified and delimited in accordance with this law, while Certificate of Ancestral Land Titles CALTs formally recognize the rights of ICCs, IPs over their ancestral lands.
Number 3, build public awareness. Informed public education and awareness building is critical to the implementation of indigenous rights. This is a responsibility of all. Number 4, recognize the rule in conservation. Indigenous peoples' key role in conservation, which is often one of the reasons used for their eviction, needs to be recognized. Indigenous peoples' dependence on the land for food, shelter, identity, and survival has resulted in a deep respect for that land and a need to conserve it. Indigenous people traditionally develop a set of conservation measures that are passed down from one generation to the next, and as a result, they should be seen as the best people to conserve that land.
Number 6, bridge the gap between policy, practice, and another major challenge is the gap between policy and the practice of law. And the second to the last of the ways that can help us in protecting the indigenous people are bridge the gap between policy and practice. And lastly, number 8 is learn from the stories of progress. So here are the ways that we can help in protecting our indigenous people. They are very valuable and we need to protect them.